welcome. It's Tuesday, December 10th. It's 9 p.m. in the DMV, 6 p.m. here in Los Angeles. I'm Jack Armstrong.
And I'm Sam Giacinto, and you're listening to Tech Talk Live. Welcome to the show. Chatter call in with your tech news and a ton to talk about this week. We have a special guest, Kish from Amazon, to talk a little bit about reInvent and the new developments in the generative AI space. But first, we got to talk about Sora. I don't know how much you guys have heard about Sora, but we have to talk about it. It's been kind of making waves in a lot of ways.
Awesome. Well, welcome to the show, Kish. Good to have you. Excited to talk tonight. And yeah, absolutely, Sam. There's a lot of cool developments with Sora. I noticed they're having some throttling issues. It looks like a very busy day for the launch today. It looks like if you can get it to work, right? It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Did you guys, again, thanks for having me on the show. I was able to sign up for Sora before the traffic bottleneck, and it's incredible.
Have you tried? What are some prompts that you've tried, or you've that have impressed you, or perhaps been a little bit janky? I mean, we've seen a wide variety of examples come out thus far.
I've had issues with general sharpness of objects. For example, when you ask it to create, I don't know, a picture of a hill, the boundary layers between sky and the terrain, or for example, a cliff in the sea, those seem to be really jagged. And of course, other video aspects of objects seem to be off. So, like, I don't know, cars seem a little weird, the physics of cars. But I've tried some general prompts, most of them related to everyday life. Hey, give me a short video about traffic, or show me a car going through falling through a cliff. Just some small random things.
Yeah, I'm interested, especially at the point, right, you mentioned jagged edges around like the foreground and background. So I guess like a cliff in front of the ocean. So I'm wondering if it generates video layers by depth and then tries to stitch them together, I guess. I'm watching a few examples just to kind of see, even their example video of, you guys may have seen this, a woman walking down the street in Tokyo, and the edges are a little bit interesting. Yeah, I see what you're saying in terms of like, there's almost like a blur effect around the border of objects in the foreground and then in the background. I guess that separation.
Yeah, and I think from what I've read, it has something to do with the way GANs work. The GANs are generative adversarial networks.
Okay.
And they have something called a discriminator that evaluates generated content and distinguishes it from real videos. And then eventually it gets put into, this is going too in depth, but it goes through something called diffusion, which actually stitches stuff together from pure noise. It's essentially, think of it as running Fourier transforms in reverse. And sometimes, the boundary layers do get diffused far too much.
That's interesting. I know one of the things a lot of people in Hollywood are doing is they'll upscale. So they'll use upscalers in conjunction with these diffusion models to kind of add back that detail, I guess, that you're saying. Yeah, it's taking it out when it overdoes it. If you know what I mean by that.
Yeah.
like Topaz Labs and other upscale video techniques. And actually, well, I don't want to get too ahead of the other topics of the night, but I think Topaz Labs just came out with, of course, server-based rendering. So where you can put larger quantities of video into the cloud, into their cloud infrastructure, and essentially sending it to an API that can get upscaled with greater power and performance than you could achieve on your local device, even if you have, a really powerful, M4, or whatever, chip in your, desktop or laptop or whatever. So I think, yeah, it's interesting to see how people are using upscalers in conjunction with these generative AI video tools.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Have you ever come across upscalers for? Do these work? Are you referring to the same upscalers that they use to upscale? I don't know, 720p videos to 4K.
Yes, it's the same
Okay.
thing. I'm not too familiar how it's actually passing that over, but it's just like generative AI is creating, your prompt out of thin air. It is taking the image in front of it and it is filling in the detail that doesn't exist. So like when you zoom in, it kind of, I guess, vectorizes, if that's a way to describe it, the tree branches and leaves and hair and skin and every detail, and it says, hey, yeah, this is a tree. I can see the greater image, but now I'm enhancing the detail of the branches and the leaves, and I'm doing that with this, the video that I already have. So the good thing with upscalers, and because I've actually used this to upscale 4K to 8K or 1080p, to larger resolution. So it's pretty impressive because it's subtle, but it's interesting because it really is taking the detail in front of it and it's filling in even greater detail because it sees what it's creating, if that makes sense, or it sees what it sees what the scene is. It sees what it's doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So it's cool. Before Sora came out, obviously Kling AI with the Chinese one was pretty impressive. And then I have a storyboarding tool called Catalyst AI, and that actually does a pretty good. The videos are like 5 seconds, so they're a little short, but for like a montage, it'll export 1080p clips, but the detail again is to be desired. So if you upscale it, it doesn't. It does kind of smooth out the edges and it adds more detail. So yeah, it's kind of cool. It's I guess we don't really know going forward. It's going to be very hard to tell as these generative models get better, with video and longer videos and more realistic facial expressions and of course more detail. Honestly, what can you believe anymore? What can we believe?
Hey, that's a good point. There's
It's like you watch something and it's going to be really hard to tell. Like, is that a real scene or like?
It reminds me of those. So I'm in Virginia, and we have. It's illegal to use radar detectors in Virginia, and so it goes 6 layers deep. There's a radar detector, and then there's a detector. I think it goes like 5 or 6 layers deep, and it's a similar for like AI videos. There'll be an AI video detector, and then a detector to bypass that detector.
Yes.
It's a Tom and Jerry game of technology.
Yeah, it's fun. And technology is proceeding at a rapid rate.
Well, but eventually, and I'm not saying you won't need to use, a bypass tool that can, prevent detection, but I think it's going to be interesting because I actually have experience working with a director recently, and they're incorporating AI drone shots into a montage scene of real footage. So it's fascinating because it's not necessarily that AI is going to be making an entire movie with tools like Sora, but could it enhance like what scenes or what backgrounds are going to be artificially created for the film versus, because today what do you have to do? Before these tools, you would go on stock video libraries. So these stock video libraries honestly are, I don't know what's going to happen to them, because I don't think the demand is going to be there when somebody can get a highly customized shot with a generative video tool like Sora, and it pretty much will ideally give them exactly what they want, and they don't have to fall back onto things like stock, video sites. So I think, yeah, it's very fascinating seeing how these, tools are enhancing filmmaking. But, filmmakers have always had special effects and green screens, and, they've already been, that background, for example, large stadium scenes, right? They've always kind of used, in a way, generative AI to paint people that aren't actually there, because you only need so many extras, and then eventually the way back, far background, it doesn't really matter anymore. So I think these tools just are going to be fooling more and more people as they get better.
Well,
For
not to
sure.
bring it back to, I don't know if you guys saw, the Will Smith eating spaghetti, perhaps example 2 years ago now, I want to say. But
Yeah.
the amount of advancement from then versus now, even, like we saw with text generation models. I mean, it's just sort of like we're going from kind of laughably, it's like something you could almost laugh off to, something that is passively real, as you said. I mean, at least for stock footage,
Yeah.
Some fidelity, it doesn't have to be, some images, depending on the draw distance, the fidelity doesn't necessarily have to be incredibly good. It just has to be good enough.
Oh yeah. Well, also, it's yeah. Go ahead. Sorry, Kish. Go ahead.
Funny you mentioned that. I was just rewatching Friends right before this podcast, and when you're talking about the stock videos, it reminded me of those transitions, the 2-second transitions that they have between scenes, and how AI can automatically insert those without a human trying to find transitions to add between two clips. It's basically automating away the mundane stuff for a video.
Oh
yeah, I mean, like video editing and just sort of, I mean, even storyboarding and just sort of taking the raw footage, right? They could just, throw a bunch of raw footage and, maybe even not have to set the order. And then anytime there's a substantial change, cue the, kind of make the first pass of editing with AI and then just tweak it, collect the data, the edits, and save it for next time. I mean, just sort of like, so that is an interesting point, because a lot of the, what makes video editing, I feel like, a monotonous process is trimming and splitting the clips. And that's a huge, just sort of like, as you said, just, have AI insert between differing scenes. It's not too hard. I mean, it's really not that difficult. It's sort of like,
well, also, if you think about it, with certain models and tools that can also understand a script, and if you're slating, which is the clapboard before the take, if you're slating, which every film is in television shows really doing, it's going to be cool to see if and how AI will also help with not only transitions and video generation and all this stuff, but with truly ordering the shots together automatically. And yeah, I think there's a lot of potential for that too.
And I guess you mentioned, because I know they don't get a ton of airtime, but what was the Chinese model you mentioned, Jack?
Oh yeah, it's called Kling. Kling
yeah.
AI. That's a KLING. Kling. And
I see. So yeah, I've seen a few demos of this, basically, for trying on clothes. Basically, I guess I've seen that where it's like you can upload a photo and essentially have yourself wear any outfit, type deal.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think Kling is more I don't want to say animated, but it's a weird kind of middle ground. What I've seen from the videos that are generated with their tool, it seems you can, of course it's AI, you can tell, and but I think it's very impressive how cinematic it looks for a video that's, again, not that's not real. So it's the amount of, I guess, training probably in just cinematic arts that they've done to these models to get the lighting perfect, to understand the environment, because that's a lot of what a model's creating too. Like, where's the light source? Is it a soft source? Is it and also when our subject is moving through the space, through this environment, how is it going to impact the light and the detail? And so I think Kling, but Sora wasn't public until recently, obviously today, but I feel like we've seen previews of it, and I think that Kling kind of had the spotlight until today, but competition is good, and I think bringing ideas to life faster, it'll be interesting to see how people use this.
So have you tried Kling at all?
I have. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I was doing the AI cat videos with Kling, so I would generate them with like Flux on Super Machine, and then I would kind of use them. Very similar to Pika and Runway, but yeah, I mean, it does a good job with it. I don't feel like it was something that, like, I don't know, it still takes a lot of manual time. I know it's kind of odd to say that, but it takes a lot of like sitting there and prompting and rerunning it, and it just kind of, I think compared to image models, I just got frustrated where it just feels like it burns through your credits extremely quickly compared to something like, a super machine aggregator or even like Runway to some extent. So yeah, I've had good experiences with it, but I think that that's the missing component right now. Is these models are too powerful, from my understanding, to run locally, but then to run them in the cloud, of course, it takes processing power, and those resources need to come from somewhere. And so that's why and of course the company's trying to make money for research and development. So it's why it's not cheap. And I think people understand that, but I think when you think about it, text is the cheapest, image is the next most expensive, and then now we're getting into video, and then of course there's models that are even more expensive to run. So I think that these are considerations that I'm sure at the Amazon event we can't wait to hear about. But I feel like it would be interesting to see how companies are addressing this, these concerns, because I mean, data centers already are getting a bad reputation with consuming too much power and resources, And so yeah, well, should we talk about reInvent, guys?
Yeah, I mean, there's a
Yeah, let's
lot
do
to
it.
talk about. I mean, it's huge. I mean, I have had a few stories. I don't know what you guys are particularly interested in. I mean, I know, Jack, you mentioned the really the resource consumption, and I think there's, I guess, a lot of new chips in the works, a lot of new hardware, I guess, purpose built by AWS for powering AI supercomputers, to kind of get away from NVIDIA, and perhaps, the claim is, 40 to 50% efficiency gains, I guess. I don't know
Yeah.
how such a single line, computation to just kind of pull out. But they've been doing some interesting things, I
Yeah.
guess, with something called Trainium.
Yeah. So to give in background, Trainium chips are made by Annapurna Labs that Amazon bought years ago. They're basically a research firm for chips, and I don't know where they manufacture the chips, but that's where they developed them. And yeah, Trainium 3 was released. That will power the new TRN um, instances. Um, but before we go there, TRN instances are extremely expensive, even now.
I bet. Yeah. I mean, it's probably not, I guess they call them ultra servers.
Yeah,
The EC2 has a TRN2 instance. But I
yeah.
guess, to be fair, that includes 16 of these bad boys.
Hmm.
Pretty,
Yeah, I mean they have some pretty insane specs, to be fair. I think the TRN2 currently has the 48X has about 16 of the Trainium 2 chips with 1.5 terabytes of memory. That's the RAM. Um, uh, that's pretty nuts.
No, and yeah, I guess what's interesting too is, I guess, they have a partnership with Anthropic,
Yeah.
looking to, essentially train Anthropic's models on the new hardware. Now, honestly, I have to really dig into, like, the, I guess, specifics of this, because, to be completely honest, I had not heard of Annapurna Labs before
Yeah.
researching for this week. I guess they've been pretty under the radar. At least, I mean, I haven't heard anyone else talk about them. So, but I guess an Israeli microelectronics company acquired in 2015 by Amazon, somewhere in the zero point 0.3 billion range. And I guess they've been really doing, I guess, the general purpose Gravitron CPUs, and now, I guess, the Trainium. I don't know what happened to. I honestly didn't even hear about Trainium 1, so I guess it's interesting to sort of see
Yeah. This
at least the media coverage that it's been getting now.
yeah, too. Unlike Azure or Google Cloud, uh, Amazon does make AWS specifically does make most of their income through commercial partners rather than individuals looking to work on Skunkworks project. So it doesn't really make as much headlines, since the people using the services are rather large companies who don't advertise what they use in the first place.
No, and that makes sense. I'm reading a bit more now. I guess it looks like they build it in house in Texas.
Oh, wow.
Um, at least for, I mean, this is very high level, but I guess it builds its own hardware. I mean, I'm just going off the About Amazon. All chips are designed and built by the Annapurna Labs team in multiple locations. I mean, it's interesting because I don't know what building hardware means. I don't know if they fab the chips there and they build the boards. I mean, because they have the chip itself sort of on a breakout board, of which is stacks and stacks are placed inside of a server. So I'm curious where they're actually manufactured. But yeah, no, I wonder. I mean, this is all just a personal discovery mission for me, because it's again, like, this was the first time I'd heard of them, and I guess probably not the last.
Yeah.
So Sam, I feel like it's fascinating too. I'm noticing that and Kish, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like reading an article, it seems like a large focus of reInvent this year was the fact that AI is just simply being mixed into so many different aspects and so many different applications. And so if developers don't focus on things like cost and efficiency, and of course, these new chips and processors and cloud solutions are brought forward, like, it's just going to slow down kind of the implementation of AI, right?
Oh, 100%. I think.
Because like AI is not a separate thing. Like, it's not like, oh, AI is its own thing, we don't need to worry about it. No, AI is already a part of so many tools, and its usage, given poor efficiency, if new solutions are not implemented quickly, it's not going to look good, I guess. Or I guess it seems kind of like the lowest cost to the highest performance will always win, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so, yeah, how do you achieve that, right?
It's so at this point, I work specifically in EC2 core. Are you guys familiar with EC2?
Well,
I'm
yeah, I
not.
guess at a general level,
Okay,
it's
so
huge.
yeah, so EC2 is Amazon's bread and butter, AWS bread and butter. It's elastic compute cloud. They provide scalable computing capacity of all sorts. You could be training your AI models, or you could be running a website, or you could be running a bot to buy stuff for you. So they all run on EC2. So most of AWS services are built on top of EC2, and it's a really interesting service because it's built on top of itself. So every EC2 runs on EC2, which is interesting, and everything else runs on top of EC2. So it's a really weird cycle. So the better we make the instances that you run on, the better the services that run on top. And this goes for example, one of the announcements was Bedrock. So Bedrock foundation models are just foundation models where people can train their own models on top of Amazon's or use the models as they are. And then there's the Amazon Titan image generator that basically just generates images given a text description. Now, all of these are built on top of foundations that were set through Trainium or TRN instances. So it's a really interesting company, since everything that we make is built on top of what company already owns.
Can you talk about I read about SageMaker and how that is being integrated into these general applications and just the whole ecosystem of AWS?
Yeah. So SageMaker, so I think the main announcement during the reInvent was the Lakehouse. SageMaker now has the ability to combine data lakes and data warehouses and to perform unified analytics and machine learning on a single data copy. So the TLDR is SageMaker, think of it as an AI-powered analytics tool. And it's heavily used within Amazon as well to make our own statistical analysis better. So, for example, a theoretical example may be, hey, we have, like any other large company, there's a ton of metrics that we are checked every second or every minute to make sure nothing is out of bounds. Now, the problem is, as a person, you can only maybe perhaps check a few dozen at a time and try to correlate what may have happened if there's an outage. But if you were to feed an entire snapshot of, let's say, a service goes down, and you feed the entire data of that service to SageMaker and say, analyze what could be correlated to each other, it will probably make really good assumptions and provide you a pathway for investigation. Does that help? Does that answer your
Gotcha.
question?
So like easier troubleshoot. Yeah, I guess because AI is helping in the data lake and warehouse sort of. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not an expert. I have very little experience and knowledge of this area. So
I'm not an AI expert either, but I like algorithms, and AI helps me analyze algorithms better or find correlations that would have been missed by most people.
Interesting. It's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just reading a bit more, and I guess a lake house combines a data warehouse and a data lake, in that I guess you have, structured, semi-structured, really just a collection of really just random inputs. So similar to a data lake, in that you have essentially a consolidated governance and metadata layer. So you can essentially manage and control access to your data for usable output, machine learning, data science, reports, business intelligence. Whereas I guess a data warehouse was more for structured data, with more limitations on sort of how or what the input data was. And I guess it's a little bit more flexible, I guess, in terms of how it handles and processes unstructured data.
Yeah. And so the general theme of AWS reInvent is usually new announcements, general large umbrellas of how they manage this show. Is there's new announcements and new products. Then there's something called modernization, which migration and modernization is a different path as well. And then there's an entire path for AI dedicated. And the cool thing is, in the past few years that I've been at AWS, all of the new products that were announced to some extent have used the bedrocks and the foundations set up by the push for AI within the company. So the new products that have been built from ground up use all of the new services that were written to analyze your data, to write better code, to monitor your service better, and it's pretty cool. Legacy services, not so much, since they've been there for decades. It not not decades, but at least a decade, and it's fairly difficult to move something that old. But everything new builds on top of, has some aspect of ML added to it, just to make the developers and development cycle and operational management simpler.
Interesting. Also, so decentralization we discuss a lot. Is this an important consideration? And how is Amazon, improving like redundancy and as AI continues to grow?
So it's not directly correlated to AI, but there is. So the way Amazon is set up is we have regions, and regions are named after airport codes. So the largest region for Amazon is US East 1, which is IAD Dallas in Virginia. And then there's other regions like SFO, which would be US West, CMH, which is US East 2, that's in Ohio, and numerous others around the world. Now, within these regions, the problem comes down to each of these regions. First and foremost, if something is affected in one of the region, it can never affect the other region. They have to be completely regionally detached. So every service has a copy of itself in every region. Nothing is centralized.
I see.
So that way, if one of the server farms goes down, it doesn't affect the world.
Yeah. So, but amongst Amazon services, so I guess a concern was, so last week we talked about how AI is, I guess, writing malware, and how malware, I guess, as a service is becoming a bigger boom. So, I mean, I guess obviously Amazon, sadly is probably a huge target. I mean, I just hope that, the bad actors of the AI and the attacking servers and AI farms, I hope that Amazon's also considering those risks.
Oh, 100%. Without going into details, I've
Is
spent
it a
many
problem
nights.
in your view?
Oh
Is
yeah,
it a problem? Yeah.
100%. I've so everyone at Amazon has to be on call. Most people have to be on call, and I've spent numerous nights while being on call trying to fix issues because they're bad actors using some vulnerability they may have found, maybe by happenstance, maybe using AI generate ideas to essentially uh,
They're like taking advantage
resource
of an
starve.
opportunity, right?
Yeah, they to essentially resource starve other customers, and that's a big problem. That's just an ongoing issue, and it happens all the time, more often than you know. Um, and that those exploits. I mean, when you bring up something, you could test it every which way you can think of, but and then there's always some door left open, and it has gotten better with the integration of like Code Whisperer or GitHub Copilot or even those tools. Even if you don't use them to, I don't know, write write all of your codes, they will give you some good evaluation of, hey, maybe this could have been exploited. Hey, maybe this code path is weird or should be rewritten. Um, and then there's larger tools that will help you penetration testing of a service that also uses AI to find out, hey, what was left open? Are there any ports that are open? Hey, what happens if I jumble up certain requests? Do I get privilege access without asking for it? So there's levels of security that go into managing risk, but it's a cat and mouse game. Um, Someone out there probably have find something that we haven't thought of, and then we learn something, and the next time around there's a new service, we make sure to test that. But then there's something else that comes up. It's a continuous mouse and cat game. And no one's winning. I think the biggest
Well,
loser
keeps you
is
busy.
just time.
Wow.
Yeah, I guess we talked about that a little bit, maybe a few weeks ago. Just just sort of AI malware in terms of for the same reasons it can be used to suggest tests or sort of open doors for any production code. It can also be used nefariously in that way.
Yeah.
So not to mention the cat and mouse game is real in that there's good actors and bad actors to
Yeah. It's not just AI has definitely a forerunner and is talked about a lot, but I think one aspect that most people may not think about is social engineering, just employees. Having worked here, I know the amount of privilege access people have, and if any one of them decides to do something nefarious, it could be catastrophic. Yeah.
Damn.
Well, one thing I did want to talk about, I know that I saw, I guess, somewhat curious is, I guess, Amazon kind of replicating their e-commerce strategy for the AI cloud in terms of, there's AWS Marketplace for models that you can, run on Bedrock. So there's kind of a neutral stance to, it seems like they understand that their customers are going to want choice when it comes to that, and kind of implementing that in, like other AWS products in a marketplace format, where you have, official and perhaps unofficial images. I don't really know how the vetting process of the model marketplace. Looks like there's maybe 170 something on there right now that are vendor neutral in that way. So I think that's kind of by far kind of the, again, like every model has its limitations. I mean, it's a singular point of failure when we're talking about redundancy and just kind of how things operate. So it's sort of, I think that take is both unique, but also, perhaps the right call there. I mean, we'll see, but you really can't go wrong. I guess I'm actually signing into the console now just to see how many are present in there, but I think it's 170 within Bedrock, which is another new product they announced. We have a view model catalog. So we have 136, available to run now. We have Amazon's Nova models, which are kind of their brand new offering, but then also all of the classics. I mean, we have from Meta, we have Anthropic, I guess Solar Mini Chat, or even Nematron from NVIDIA, which I think is pretty funny. So even their direct competitors, I mean, they realize the value in sort of providing, so yeah, Nematron has 0 deployments so far. That's pretty funny. But I think it's an interesting take. I mean, I think there's a lot of strengths to it. I don't know. I mean, it's certainly like a big announcement, I think, from that standpoint.
So, so I would love, Sam, if it's cool, and Kish, to pivot to well, still with reInvent, but just discussing kind of, again, obviously there's a lot of industries that are, changing with AI, probably every industry, right? But how is AWS and just Amazon as a whole? I mean, I know the shopping, with Black Friday gets a bad reputation with all the waste that's generated by just unnecessary consumerism, just people just buying things that they don't need just because there's a deal. So you might see where I'm going with this. Obviously,
yeah.
How are they focusing on environmental sustainability and green computing? Like, are there initiatives in place where they talked about this year at reInvent? Is it kind of in the pipeline of what's coming? I mean, is it just, we're going to get more solar panels on our data centers, or we're going to, I mean, like, how is AWS addressing these concerns?
As far as I remember, I think AWS is still committed to be 100% powered by renewable sources by 2025. So that'll be like wind and solar farms, and this is global. That's one thing that's just consuming power. But apart from that, but unlike Amazon, where it doesn't depend, the deals are not powered by usage. The deals are powered by what's on sale. Like it's for example, there's no way for Amazon to predict, hey, there might be there's ways, but it's not accurate. Like there's no way for Amazon to predict, hey, in December 2026 there's going to be there would be an influx of people ordering lip balms. Maybe there's more people buying lip balms. Maybe we should start stocking more lip balms. I'm sure there's algorithms set in place, but there's no way to predict the future demand to 100% accuracy. But whereas for AWS, it's the services that AWS comes out with, or the new services, are always powered by the ask. So the ask precedes the service. So there's someone out there who requested a certain aspect of a service or a whole new product that they want to migrate, and that creates enough demand for AWS to allocate resources. So that in a way is a sustainable business model, because there is a market before you start
I see.
creating.
So they're not just unnecessarily sitting, so much capacity available,
Yeah.
but I see.
Yeah.
Well, and
So
I guess a big part of that too, and not to cut you guys off, I mean, especially with this custom built hardware, as Kish said, kind of building from the ask. I think at least, from what I've read, it seems like, acquiring and building, their hardware from the ground up was sort of based on, there's a need, and sort of, providing that, in a similar way to Apple, where it's sort of, if you control the hardware, with the end in mind, you're able to have huge efficiency gains in that department. So when it comes to power usage and just general resource consumption, controlling the full stack, it seems like there's a large amount of, at least from what I can figure out, I guess I'm really just shocked because I still did not hear about Annapurna Labs before today, but it makes a ton of sense where it's like once you're that massive, even a 1% improvement in your efficiency at your data center is going to yield incredible, results just because of the scale. So I think, from that aspect, and then also, as far as powering data centers, we've seen a record number of applications for, nuclear power plants to come back online and kind of provide the base load, for data centers. Microsoft's powering up 3 Mile Island, and I'm sure Amazon's also looking at, hey, we decommissioned this power plant 10 years ago. What's really wrong with it? Let's throw some money in there and just kind of have, a carbon neutral baseline. Nuclear is kind of the forgotten, it's really been forgotten for so long. And I think the sudden need for really a realistic resource, because again, like solar panels are great, but when all the gamers log on at here we are at 9:52 on the East Coast, this is peak power time. So it's just sort of like, what are we going to do about it type deal. So I think between really the nuclear renaissance in that way and then custom building the hardware, I think are two huge kind of innovations that kind of fly, again, have flown under the radar. At least to me, I consider myself somewhat well read, but also I think for the average person too.
There's also I just thought of this. There's in the few years that I've worked for Amazon, I've seen new products come up from ground up. One example I'll give you, and it's public now, it's Dish 5G network. So my team was involved in bringing up this product specifically for Dish. They want to bring up an entire 5G network that runs on cloud. Now, the Dish could have gone their own way and partnered with existing telecoms, or if they really felt like spending money, brought up their own network from ground up, which includes a lot more quote unquote environmentally harmful practices, because you are bringing up hardware, trying to find land to place the telecom networks, etc., versus you can bring it up on an existing cloud infrastructure that you're basically filling the gaps that are not taken up, that are left unused. So if a service only uses 80% of its instances, maybe you put up another customer like Dish, and maybe they can use 82% of the available instances. Do you see my point? There's some, there's some good reasons for large companies to start moving to cloud. I'm not trying to be an advertiser for a big cloud here, but
AWS is doing it. That's part of their strategy. I guess they're partnering with consultants to recommend it. So you're right there with them. It's part of the growth plan. But there are advantages. You can't deny.
Like bringing up a new company while using existing sustainable infrastructure just makes sense, not just economically, but also in the long term for carbon footprint.
Well, and you are right in that way. There is something to be said about economies of scale. Especially for being realistic, just kind of, again, with nuclear power, that's something that requires a large upfront investment. it's not inexpensive to own and operate and license and register a nuclear power plant. But that's like the largest source of carbon neutral energy that is sustainable for a workload that, a data center is probably relatively consistent in power usage. I mean, people are streaming, maybe it's slightly higher, but it's not, I wouldn't say it varies, as much as, the wind or the sun, output does. And I think, if you are a company like Dish, it's like you can sort of have your own in-house sustainability initiatives and try and build your own solar power plant, and do all kinds of, workarounds to it. But if you don't have the economy of scale where it's like, well, in a way we can support these larger initiatives because really nobody else can. So that's an interesting point. I mean, because from Dish's perspective, why not just run on AWS? Because, I mean, that achieves your sustainability goal of you're not running your own compute and then having to purchase carbon credits, which are basically a scam, and then, or, try and generate your own renewable power, which is also just incredibly difficult and really not even your business vertical. So it's sort of like, you kind of offload that responsibility, and I know that's attractive for business in general, is offloading the responsibility. But we'll have to see what Amazon does with it. I mean, honestly, the jury's out. I remember thumbing through an article. I mean, in Northern Virginia alone, we're going to basically double our power usage by 2040, and just 15% of that increase is going to be from, essentially, just residents and commercial. So the rest of that's going to be from data centers. So a vast majority of that demand is going to be from the data center. And so so they do have somewhat of a responsibility to foot the bill in that way. I mean, not to assign, any of that, but it's sort of like, if you use the power, then you should help to generate it. I mean, it's just sort of like, is this the utility company's problem? I don't know. I mean, it's sort of like, that's a big lift. And it's hard to build that infrastructure out when it's like, we've just projected that to be the case. So we have to build all of that before we even get paid for it. I mean, that's difficult. It's a conundrum for sure.
Yeah. I feel like companies also view the cloud as just this kind of ever expanding, we can consume as much as possible. And not only Amazon, but I do think that it's interesting. Yeah, you bring up Dish, because that's a good way to, I guess, not need to have your own capacity and the resources that involves, but you still, I guess by running them on AWS, right, they're not increasing demand. I guess they are filling in gaps, but I guess more people should be thinking about how can data centers, because it's not like when we're scrolling on social media, right? Like nobody really thinks about how much, like, the back end that has to go be stored somewhere, all your interactions. Same thing with YouTube.
I mean,
all those YouTube videos. I mean, like, we're just constantly creating data, and how do you manage it efficiently going into the future, especially with the demands of AI? It's a fascinating topic.
Well, and you bring up a good point, because again, especially with a lot of the, even generative AI, right? I mean, nobody tells you how much it's very transparent, right? I mean, we're used to just typing things into a box. Well, I should say it's very opaque. Sorry. Well, it's transparent to us because there's no logistical difference between us just typing into a box relatively and like typing into Twitter. But one of those, internet requests uses 1,000 times the amount of resources on the back end, and it's completely invisible to you. So it is hard to like. Humans are already, this is a pervasive problem of judging the effects of actions, and this is sort of amplifying that to, the 10th degree, basically. It's a fun cat meme, like I made, just sort of like, there's no like, it's not a, there's no like, 10 trees just got chopped down to make this cat meme. It's just sort of like funny cat meme. I typed it in, it's just sort of like, but I don't know how you even relate those two, it's sort of, it's really about quantifying and kind of relating it to like, hey, you just used the same amount of energy that you would use in 6 months to make this cat meme or something. I don't know. And maybe that would make people think about it, maybe not.
True. Well, also, what's a solution that's not firing up, these old power plants just to temporarily? Because that's a dangerous game. But also, if you cut your phone usage or your internet usage, let's say, in half, obviously every hour to, business and personal and streaming versus gaming versus AI tasks, they're all, they're not comparable. But I guess if you cut time on the internet, if people just consciously use less resources, is that the solution? I don't know. I mean, how can we survive, and be conscious for the data? Because even generating, let's take Sora as the perfect example of the day, right? That's probably very power intensive. Okay. And obviously OpenAI has the funding, but if you think about it, to really power all of those requests, it's a lot. That's got to be expensive, And so if everybody in the world was doing that, at the same time, I mean, it's not sustainable. And I'm not saying AI is not sustainable, but it's like you have to think about how data and AI and all of the cloud solutions can truly become sustainable and utilize, resources properly. I don't know. It's weird.
I think I have a more nuanced view on it. AI is definitely accelerated in the past few years, but it's equivalent to when it's like the first steam engine or the first commercial car engine. I mean, at the genesis of these technologies, they were extremely inefficient. Did it take a while for us to reach 50% combustion efficiency? Yes. I think it's the similar thing for computation and AI. We're just now starting to explore the depths of what can be achieved, and efficiency will follow because it has a monetary gain. And
that's true. I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, but also
a lot of trade-offs in that way, right? I guess,
Yeah.
Because how many more cycles, do you feasibly have, I guess, not to, before there's a problem, sort of before the economic benefits outweigh the, because I mean,
Yeah.
in a lot of ways, I mean, I'm curious, I mean, probably something I'll look up after this is, I mean, the relative power usage of AI versus all other industrial, I mean, it's just sort of like, we've had the Industrial Revolution, we've had the steam engine, how much power are we consuming today for this versus, other, periods in history where, at least relatively, right, it's sort of like how much power is needed, how much power do we have, and how much can we even generate? I mean, that's really also, I mean, because the Earth is somewhat finite in that way. So I guess, the sun is limitless, but there's a limit to how much we can capture from it, relatively speaking. So
Yeah.
that's,
I mean,
that's
also,
interesting.
yeah. I mean, given the current world we are in, There's equal weight for positive monetary gain from efficiency, but there's also something to be said for positive punishment for not following efficiency, since we have so many laws in place, which is a good thing for maintaining carbon footprint. So it's not just we got to save $1, it's also don't want to be punished for not being efficient. And I think both of those together will drive efficiency ahead.
Yeah.
Hopefully, as more and more things, I don't know if you've heard my rogue Siri that just keeps speaking without being requested.
It's trying to
Yeah.
escape. Yeah.
I don't know what's going on with it. It just randomly. I'm not kidding. I don't know if it's the new update with the Apple Intelligence or what, but this HomePod just keeps 2 + 5 = 7. And I'm like, did I ask you? No, I didn't. And I'm not kidding. Like, these are the random things it'll just spout out. So it kind of is worrying. Like, imagine how much, as our homes get connected and AI is now in everything, gosh, it's like, this is not very efficient. Whatever's going on with this HomePod is kind of, it's a problem. I don't know how to fix it other than unplugging it.
Yeah.
So anyway, well, great. Any final thoughts for this episode, guys? Great conversation.
Yeah, no, really, and thank you again for coming on, Kish. I always appreciate guests, and really,
thank you for having me.
Super cool. Honestly, I mean, not to give ourselves praise or anything, but a lot of interesting topics, from a policy, a philosophical and otherwise perspective on the future of technology.
Yeah,
so hope to have you back on sometime.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Come back. Thanks again. Yeah, we're here every Tuesday night, so same time, same place.
Yeah, so, for sure. I'll reach out again, and thank you for having me. This is really fun.
Yeah, and we'll be back next Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. I'm Sam.
And I'm Jack, signing off for this week.